This one's gonna get me into some trouble again. A few weeks ago, I did a video about what I would recommend for entry-level steering wheels into the sim racing hobby. Well, today I thought I would match that up with what should be your entry-level game for sim racing. So I did what I do best. I created a spreadsheet to compare all of the strengths and weaknesses that each game has towards what a beginner would want in it. So I'm taking the 8 most popular sim racing games and ranking them based on if I would recommend them to a brand new sim racer. We're going to be considering multiple different factors for multiple different types of sim racers. First, the entry cost, which is the barrier of entry, what you have to pay to boot up the game in the first place. If there's a subscription, what is included in the base content, how much is there with all the content, and how much does that DLC cost, if the game is moddable, and the current player base number of players. This list is going to be balancing 2 different types of sim racers that I have in mind. The first being the type of sim racer who just wants to be immersed in the world of sim racing by putting a car on a track and racing either by themselves or against the AI. And the other type of sim racer is the one who just wants to race against human beings, compete, esports type of deal, you name it. And finally, I spent a couple hours on this research, but take my numbers with a slight grain of salt. I could be wrong, and please let me know if any numbers that I state are wrong. But starting at number 8, we already have a fiery rage bait opinion. Number 8 is Assetto Corsa Evo. As I make this video in early 2025, the game is still brand new in early access with very limited content. The game itself, while getting some good reviews about its physics and its driving, the thing that is lacking is the polish that you would expect from a fully released racing game, which Assetto Corsa Evo obviously isn't. Because of this, I cannot recommend this to be anyone's first sim racing game. You gotta love the ecosystem already to just be along with the ride with Kunos and follow their development. But if you have room for only one sim racing game to learn and grow your passion in it, this would be a very frustrating one to do so. As of right now, this game has the highest cost barrier of entry with $40, but that gets you access to everything currently in the game. But it's pretty slim pickings compared to all of the other titles on the list because, once again, this is early access. There probably is going to be modding in this game eventually, but it is definitely not available right now, and who knows what the extent of the allowable modding is going to be in the future. So while this is the trendy sim racing game out on the market right now, everybody's talking about it, if you are just getting into the hobby and you want to find a game to try to learn how to drive, this one is not recommended in my opinion. In a similar vein, at number 7, we have Le Mans Ultimate. This is also an early access game, but an early access game that also has subscription and DLC. At this point, the game itself is much more polished than Le Mans Ultimate, which it should be after almost a year of early access, but even to that point, there isn't that much more content available in this game than a CE. I had a hard time finding out how much you really would be paying to own everything in Le Mans Ultimate because they have season passes and DLC which only contain a few cars, and then online only subscription base. But this game is a solid driving racing game that a lot of people will swear is the best physics and the best racing for what it is. Because of this, you have a sizable dedicated fan base that races pretty constantly on this game. If we were going for an online only racer, I would actually put this a bit higher on the list, but just because of the lack of overall content and the cost associated with it, it is weighted pretty far down thinking about the solo single player AI racer. But unlike Assetto Corsa Evo, I wouldn't flat out not recommend LMU to a beginner sim racer. I think that you can definitely get something out of it. I just think that all the other options on this list have more to offer for somebody just starting out. At number 6, we have another Assetto Corsa game, Assetto Corsa Competizione. This game has a lot of the same issues that LMU does for the perspective of a beginner sim racer. Not to say it's a bad game or that there's not good racing on it, it's just not an environment that you could get the most out of your time and money for the beginner type of racer. ACC has 24 base cars and 11 base tracks, but more or less the base cars can be grouped into just a couple classes, meaning that you are very limited with what you can drive by just loading up the game. One big thing that ACC could provide for new racers, though, especially those geared towards the online racing portion of it, is the existence of the third-party services like LFM, to where you can actually matchmake in races that may have people around your level that make it easier for you to learn. The driving in this game, as well as its strength. A lot of people will swear that this is the game with the best physics. You probably will see that being a trend. It's very divisive, and you almost have to see a sea of opinions on how people drive and how people think that the physics are before making a decision on what you want to try. With the current Steam sale at the time of making this video, you can buy all of the content in ACC for $60, which is on the lower end for any game. It's just that the full content of this game is just less than even some of the base content in other games. I'm starting to sound like a broken record because that's just how the story goes with some of these games, but this game doesn't feel like it was made for beginners. There just is more of this repetition, same type of track, same type of car, competitive racing that might be suitable for some people, but if you're in the discovery phase of sim racing, doesn't seem very viable to me. That being said though, ACC might be towards the top of the list for what your second sim racing game would be though, so keep that in mind as you keep discovering. At number 5 is the game that most people probably thought I was going to put last, and that is iRacing. Now, before you guys start yelling, calling me an iRacing fanboy and biased, just you wait, because if you are solely focused on online racing, I truly believe iRacing should be number 1, but it's the single player aspect of it that leaves it middle of the road. Here's my reasoning. If you are starting out in sim racing, you want to be racing around people that are your skill level, because what is the fun in just driving around, learning stuff, and being 50 seconds behind everyone in a small race where everyone's combined into one group? That's how most of these games work. But with iRacing, there is a large rookie base where you're always going to find a race with people your skill level, almost no matter what you drive. At a barrier entry of $8, you can drive a full month's worth of races with something to race every single hour just about, and you will find that if you really like that type of racing or not, you're willing to make the extra purchases and throw all that money into iRacing. I'm not saying iRacing's cheap, but it's cheap to try. At just 16 base content cars and 20 base content tracks, this is spread over many disciplines and types of racing to where you will find that you have a different experience no matter what you want to try to race, and by the end of the month, I think that you will decide whether that is the type of sim racing lifestyle that you want to go into or not. Now, on the other hand, iRacing is by far the worst option here for single player AI racing. Not to say iRacing's AI is bad, but it's just too expensive for what you're getting. With 14,000 concurrent players that are mostly online, iRacing is going to have by far the largest option of racing. So with that being said, if you are an online racer, recommend. If you are anything besides that, I would skip this one. And number 4 is kind of the anti-iRacing in a way, and that is Race Room. Race Room is the definition of a cult fan base when it comes to sim racing. It is still active. They have races that you can get on pretty much any time of the day, but you're not going to have the same choices as some of the larger services. That being said though, Race Room has 2 huge things going for it. First off, you can try the game for free. Now, it's more like a demo than anything because you barely get any cars or any tracks with the base content, but that's better than most of these games. If you want to just try to put a car on the track and drive, Race Room is literally a free option to do so. And along with this, Race Room has online services as well with a lot of DLC, but you can buy all of the DLC together, I believe, for $133 on Steam, which is not too bad when you compare it to pretty much any other of these games. What you get with that is over 225 cars and around 60-ish tracks. Now, that being said, 225 cars, there's a lot of cars that are grouped in the same classes, so it's going to be closer to like 100 different types of cars, but still, that is a lot of option and a lot of able to just mess around in sim racing for a relatively low price. And honestly, I would recommend anybody to just try out Race Room, even if it's only number 4 on the list. I just think that all the other options on this list have more to offer in certain regards in this, but that's not to say that this is a bad option. Number 3, I'm going to go with R-Factor 2. R-Factor 2 is our first game which has a very huge plus, and that is moddable. You can download community-made mods for cars and tracks, and there are a lot of fun options out there that you can just get off the Steam Workshop. That pretty much means you have infinite choice for free cars and tracks once you get the base game, which is a little bit on the higher end of $30. R-Factor is that same physics engine that LMU is on, meaning that it is a good driving experience with, again, a lot of people claiming that it's the best. By my count, with the base game, you get 33 cars and 19 tracks, which is about middle of the road, especially considering the slightly high base purchase that you have to make for the game, but I feel like that is made up by the mods. If you want to get all the rest of the officially licensed cars and tracks, that's going to run you about $285 total for over 150 cars and 48 licensed cars and tracks. Where rFactor 2 starts to fall a little bit behind in terms of the overall list though is their online racing. At the time of looking all this up, rFactor 2 actually had the lowest player count of all the games that I saw. I'm not sure if this was a glitch or not, but it seemed to be the case. And there isn't much of an online racing community in rFactor 2 anymore besides leagues that I know of. LFM ended up dropping support, which was their main online supporter, back at the end of 2023. So if you're an online racer, I might stay away from this one and go for one a little bit higher on the list. But if you don't care about online racing, I don't know if there's many better options than rFactor 2. I had a really hard time picking between number 2 and number 1 on this one because they're just strong for completely different reasons. But I think that for number 2, I'm going to go with Automobilista 2. As of right now, Automobilista 2 kinda has everything that you would want for your first sim racing game. With over 150 base content cars and over 40 base content tracks, that means that their base offering is just more than some games have in total. The price of the game being $40 is steep but reasonable considering what you get. There is even an active online scene right now with LFM support along with other online ways to race the game. And on top of that, people say that AMS2 has the best AI single player racing out of any sim racing game out there. Now, I can't confirm or deny that because personally, I've never played the game before. Okay, it's time to flame me. You put at number 2 a game you've never played before. I get it. You can flame me. I give you permission for that one. But just from the research that I have done, I just think that this game should be this high on the list from the perspective of somebody wanting to get their very first sim racing game. And I truly believe this would be a really good choice. There's just one game that is slightly better even now in the year 2025. And that is, of course, number 1, Assetto Corsa. Yes, over 10 years later, this is still the game that I would recommend that you make your very first sim racing game. At the time of making this video, it is on sale on Steam for $5 and comes with 110 base cars and 14 base tracks, but the big kicker in all of this is that this game is moddable. There is a thriving online scene for even just casual servers, not just races, but anything that you can think of. You've probably seen YouTube videos about all of the no-hezi, drifting. Assetto Corsa is almost transcended what it means to be a sim racing game because it is no longer just about racing anymore. And I think that it is the perfect experience and sandbox for the price that you have to pay to just go ahead and make it your first sim racing game. There's something to be said when the original game can outperform its predecessors, which might not be the best for the developers, but it is the sign of a very quality game, especially one that you should try out just as a beginner. Let me know in the comments below what you think about this list and make your own list out of these choices or include other games if I forgot any. Alright, thank you all for watching. Hope you have a wonderful day. Hope to see you all on the track.